Hey, everybody. Have noticed, and I think you probably all have noticed, that everybody grieves in different ways, right? And it probably changes every time you grieve, right? Don't you think? Sam, depending on when we are, where we are, who we
Yeah.
are, we grieve differently. And so we wondered, why do people grieve so differently? And in this episode, we get to meet somebody who's explored the emotional reality around grief that really doesn't follow one path. Many expect grief to look the same every time for everyone. But really, the truth is that people process loss in deeply different ways every time. So each grief you experience can be felt completely differently. We're going to talk with Sarah Baldwin today about the grief persona framework that she's created. It's a model that identifies 4 common grieving styles. She calls them the steady hand, the quiet anchor, the seeker, and the open heart, right? Um, Understanding these grief styles, I think, can really help us make sense of what we're going through, our experience, and also help us not be in conflict with others. Can help us understand what other people are going through at the same time.
Yeah. So whether you're navigating personal loss or supporting somebody else in theirs, or working in our beloved death positive and caregiving spaces, this conversation offers a grounded way or grounding to approach grief with more clarity and compassion. In this episode, we will talk about why people grieve differently. We'll explain those 4 different styles that we listed, how to support different grieving styles and families and other relationships.
Hmm.
Uh, goodness. And
Yeah,
how grief differences can impact end of life planning and communication. Think
yeah,
you're in
that's
the right space.
yeah, that's a great thing. Great help.
So, if you've ever felt misunderstood in your grief or felt like
Mhm.
you have misunderstood somebody else's and stumbled and tripped over feet in those ways,
Yeah,
I think this framework could really help.
yeah, we really appreciated this, and we really I think it's a great help. So stay tuned. See
Stay
you soon.
tuned.
Welcome all. I am the Reverend Mother Ana Luisa Armendariz, and on today's episode, we look forward to a conversation with Sarah Baldwin. Sarah is the co-founder of Restfully and the creator of the Grief Persona Framework, a model that helps people understand how they respond to loss.
Yeah, it's really a great website. Looking forward to talking more about that. I am the Reverend Wakil David Matthews. Sarah has an undergraduate degree in economics and political science from the University of Connecticut, and her background's in independent research and analytics. Sarah and the Restfully team are committed to creating tools and resources to support families preparing for or navigating end of life, because grief is hard enough, right? And yeah, that's definitely what we're all about. As we were talking earlier, we realize we're doing this work. We're all in the same kind of family here. So
Yes.
thanks so much for joining us. Can you, yeah, like I said, looking at the website, I was just really blown away by the amount of resources and the depth of resources that you have there. And can you talk a little bit about how, death brought you to this work, and what brought you to this work?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me on. What you guys have built is profound and beautiful, and I can tell a lot of hard work goes into it. And so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're building, which is Restfully. And in 2022, my mom unexpectedly got a terminal diagnosis, which, like many other people in the world, brought our life to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
And we had the blessing of spending about 3 months with her and and helping her kind of end her life on earth, and it is the worst thing you can go through, but it is also one of the more beautiful things that you can be holding space with someone for.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I kind of the dust cleared and there's this, wow, that was profound moment. And then there's also a, that was unnecessarily complicated in some ways.
Yes.
That there is a complication to saying goodbye to your mom, but there's unnecessary complications, and those really have stuck with me since, because the thing I'll say often is when someone dies, you get a long, long to-do list, but 99 of the to-do items are pretty useless, right? They're not one is grieve your mom and hold space and process a real major loss in your life.
Loss. Mhm.
But, the logistic stuff is really, really, in my opinion, unnecessarily complicated.
Yeah.
And when we look at why, it's because it's really a tough conversation, a tough industry, a tough topic no one likes to talk about, understandably, by default. And then some of us push through, and here we are having conversations. So that's really the genesis of it is, what do I wish existed when I found out my mom was diagnosed with a terminal illness? And
Mhm.
how can I take this pain and build something for people who will be following in similar paths behind me?
Mhm.
That's right. It just occurred to me as you said that too, about how fraught the process is to do the end of life pieces. And, Joaquin and I really advocate for people planning their stuff so that the loved ones don't have to go through the hellscape of grieving and having
Mhm.
to do the things. And it just occurred to me too, every individual plan will be completely different. And
Yeah.
I think that people have this perception that there is a checklist. I'm going to just do the thing. It's going to be fine. But just as that there's 8 billion ways for people to grieve, there are 8 billion ways for people to want to be going through the dying process, 8 billion ways that you'll want to be disposed of, or, however.
Mhm.
So it is so exciting. And it's like the awareness that you just were like, this was too much for me. Like, and there should be better options for so many other people. So I do
Yes.
Yeah.
appreciate that. So you launched this after your mother's passing. Tell us, like, what's your role now? What do you call yourself?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a great question. I wear a lot of different hats. But one of the things that when we came to the idea of, I want to make a website that has resources for people navigating loss. Exactly what you were saying is, no one's navigating loss the exact same way, right? Every single story is very, very personal and very, very unique.
So,
And
yeah.
because of that, it makes a really complicated problem. How do you make a website for everyone, right?
Right.
And one of the things that had kind of come up in watching other people grieve, and in my own family watching people grieve, is this idea that we don't all grieve the same way. What brings me comfort while I'm in grief might not be what brings you comfort. And when looking at that, we saw a lot of friction between people in how they grieved.
Mm.
And so one of the very first things that we did was this research on, how do different people grieve? We looked at culturally, how do different
Culture,
cultures grieve? And then also just
socioeconomics.
yes, it's and historical, where you are, all these things. And then also just people, right? Two
Mm.
people in the same exact culture with the same, I'm one of 4 kids, and my 3 siblings and I, very, very different
Yeah.
grief styles. And that actually kind of brought this light bulb moment for us was, okay, if you could actually bucket people into different categories and say, you tend to grieve like this and you tend to grieve like that, we did a lot of research to try to say, how are these different categories that people grieve? And that's where the grief personas framework came from. And
Mhm.
that has been very foundational to what we're building at Restfully, because it really feeds into anything: conflict, planning, how we think and talk about our own end of life. And so that's been probably the most fun part of this, is learning how that can help others. And that's been a huge focus.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, we talk about, the people who are listening to this probably are a little more death positive possibly than because we sort of choose our audience here, or our audience
Hmm.
chooses us. But I
Right.
think it's worthwhile to really consider that this kind of resource can bring assistance, can help anybody, and that this is why we really want to lift up your resources and the work that we're doing. That's
Mhm.
why it's so important, is we want people to start having these conversations that are more difficult. And yeah, I'd be interested to hear more about that project, and kind of tell us a little bit more about those four personas. Yeah, grief
Yes.
personas, if you would.
Yeah, happy to. So we bucket these into four, and I'll walk through them. But what I would say is at any given time, like most things were a lot of different things at the same time.
Right.
Um, and so it's common to identify with a lot of them, and maybe see yourself one way one day and different way a different day. But the four main ones are the steady hand. That is the person who gets really the most comfort from taking action. They're often the person handling logistics. And
Mhm.
the second person would be the quiet anchor. This is a person who prefers to grieve and process on their own timeline and in their own space. The third person is the seeker. They tend to look for spiritual and religious frameworks to answer some of life's biggest, most confusing questions. And then the fourth is the open heart. And that's probably the most traditional, what you would see on TV, a person crying by a bedside.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so those all four have really unique reasons. And what I've really deeply come to realize is that we need, as a society, every single one of those four types of people. And it also happens to be where some of the biggest, most painful friction is between
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love that you said that we move between those two. That's something we found with a lot of the different aspects of grieving and the aspects of life and the personalities, etc. But that
Yeah.
we aren't necessarily stuck in one. That's the world. The world doesn't work so clearly as that. So
Right.
thank you for making that point. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And I also was thinking culturally, especially in the US, I would say that people appreciate the steady hand,
Hmm.
and they'll
Right.
grant permission for that person to actually take care of business because it's doing. But the open heart and the seer may just get like steamrolled, and like there's no space for those kind of folks to be in community sharing their hearts.
Hmm. Hmm.
Absolutely. I think it's that specifically the open heart, steady hand combo can be some of the deepest friction because that's if you have a person's bedside table, take one daughter who's crying by the bed and the other daughter who's
Mhm.
coordinating logistics with the doctors. And the
Mhm.
daughter who's crying by the bed is like, come sit with mom. Like, she needs
Mhm.
you. She's
Mhm.
dying. We need to cry with mom. This is a very significant moment. And the other daughter who's coordinating logistics, like, who's going to coordinate the logistics? Like,
That's
someone has
right.
to do this. And
Yeah.
so there's this you're not grieving the right way kind of undertone that I
Mhm.
really think people, when they hear about grief personas, they just get it, they understand,
Mhm.
and you can see it in other people. And it starts being this framework where you say, hey, I see your steady hand is here today in a strong way. Can I ask you to sit with me, the quiet anchor, and just let's not talk about the funeral. Let's not talk
Logistics.
about any of
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, without this awareness, I think that's why there's a lot of wounding, at that, there's just all these people show up as themselves, and it just makes people mad, like,
Yes, exactly.
I
I
mean,
I couldn't
it's
agree
so
more.
horrifying to hear this, but I was just the Christian story of Mary and Martha. Mary is like at Jesus is, and I'm not a Christian, and this is the thing, but I remember
Yeah.
how when I was growing up, everybody like lauded
Mhm.
Mary for sitting there weeping and washing his feet with
Yes.
tears, and then Martha was in the
Yes.
kitchen doing work, and I'm like,
Exactly.
why is she always in trouble? Like, I am
Yes.
Martha. I'm gonna be
Yes.
cooking and making sure everybody's okay, but why is that denigrated like so
Absolutely.
often? And I'm like, ugh, yuck.
Mhm.
Yes. I think that's right. And I've spent a lot of time with this because um if you think anthropologically, why would we be different, right? And if you
Mhm.
say at some point we're all in a tribe somewhere and catastrophe strikes and there's a loss of someone in the tribe, you do need the steady hand who's like, okay, I understand we're all
Yeah.
really upset. I'm going to go make dinner. We have to
Right.
eat.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
you do need the person who's actually just the tears are coming through them, the grief is flowing through them.
Mhm.
you do need the quiet anchor who's in some ways to the rest of us modeling healing because they're alone, they're processing on their own. And then we do need the seeker. I think it's human condition to think, why is this all happening
Yeah.
and
Right.
what is happening?
Yeah,
So
Right.
it's
exactly.
when you think of it as a tribe, I think we have a lot of patience. And then when it's your sister, you have a lot less patience.
That's
And the other
right.
thing that happens is it's this misplaced grief, right? I talk to a lot of people who have friction around these different personas, and it's like, are you really mad at your brother-in-law? Or are you sad that your dad died? Right?
Right.
It
Yeah.
doesn't, it feels like all that energy went kind of the wrong place. And it's just giving the space to heal and show up for each other lets the real process of grief kind of flow through us.
Yeah. Wow. That's so great. So important. I think it's true too. And I think you were hinting to this, that we each have all four of these personas going on in us. And some of the conflict might be within ourselves, like
Yes.
I shouldn't be weeping right now because there's too much work to be done. Or,
Yes.
or
Yes.
vice versa. Yeah. So, wow, that's really fascinating, really important. Yeah. I think it's great that, and it's a good thing for our audience to really spend time with. I hope we will definitely give links to your site. And there's also, like, I don't know how many pages of different resource. Are they blogs or little talks that you've
Yep.
given?
There's all
Yeah.
different things. And the one
Yeah.
thing I'll say in the world of AI, these are real human, it's a
You wrote
quality.
them.
Yes. It matters. And
Yay!
yeah. So
That's
a
so
lot
good.
of work went into it because it's easy to think, let's just make 1,000 blogs and hopefully people like them. But the work of teaching grief personas to people and then learning, okay, well, different grief persona. Let's say you're planning a funeral with your family.
Hmm.
Grief personas are going to play a role in that. And so if you could start understanding grief personas and then say, all right, I see you're this or that, and let's make sure that your is the quiet anchor being represented in the funeral, not just the steady hand planning every single component of it.
Hmm.
That's
So
right.
yes.
I really appreciate that because I would want to lob this out there for people that these personas are not just for the people who are currently experiencing a death in the family, and this is how we should all figure this out in our little tribe. But I was just at a weekend retreat where people started sharing a lot of their traumas, and some people were like, I'm out of here. Some people were like leaning in, some people were crying. And I just realized, like, people do need to understand how different experiences affect people so that we can be a little less irritated with how people are presenting, right? So I would love like a funeral director to know this, so that
Yeah.
when they sense that there is friction in the family, that person could just easily say, "Hey, I see you two aren't doing so great in this moment, but is it because you need some help with the steady actions? Or, should we all just come and sit with you for a while if you want to just hold that sacred space together?" Instead of dividing and having chaotic
You go
Totally.
in that
chaos.
room.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
the same way. I think even when it comes to work, right? I was just having a conversation with someone saying, she was saying, I think I'm kind of a quiet anchor with my colleagues. I want to be an open heart with my family, but I want to be a quiet anchor. I kind of want to make sure they know I need a little more space. I need a little more time to process. I'm not, it's hard when when there's a loss and you have to return to work, no one knows what
Yeah.
to do, right? And
Right.
if everyone who's returning, if the person who's returning and the person they're returning to has this understanding, I might be an open heart, but your coworker doesn't not care
Right.
what's happening if she prefers not to cry in the staff meeting about the loss, right? It's
Sure.
just how
Yeah.
that's showing up at the moment.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see looking at this the kind of the crosswalk between many of the Enneagram and many of the other ways that we
Myers-Briggs and such. Yep.
look at our
Yes.
that we look at our personalities. I'm sure it would be fun, interesting to do that kind of crosswalk and see where they are. But it does apply to really everything in life, and because we talk about planning a lot, this would be a really good thing to go into our planning process with, to start thinking about who's going to show up and what kind of jobs can we give them or tasks can we look at that what can we expect of people that we're
That's right.
asking to be our healthcare agents, for instance, or we're asking to be
Exactly.
in charge of our disposition. Are those, how will they, asking them, how do you think you'll approach this, or how do you think you'll feel about this? So it could really help in that process as well. So
Yeah,
many different
absolutely.
ways.
I have a friend who was saying she was having a hard time because she didn't feel as though her eldest child would be the right person to be her executor. And that's
Right.
kind of like for a lot of people, it's like, well, you pick the eldest because they're the next in line.
Right.
And I really do think, again, a steady hand is a fantastic executor. They probably want to be an executor, whether they're the eldest child or the youngest child or whatever.
Something to do.
Yes. And whereas other people who process, if you're the quiet anchor and you kind of want to be alone, but you also have the task of being an executor, it's like, that doesn't, you let that person off the hook, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Right.
if you just don't have a steady hand in your house or in your home, then what do you do about that? You say, all right, we're going to have to divide this work because no one's going to really get comfort from taking action. So I think it's for planning, it's fantastic because really who are you tasking with what matters. And
Yeah.
one of the saddest stats is 61% of people after their second parent dies, they never have another meaningful interaction with their siblings again. Right?
What?
And it's just so
Wow.
sad. I know.
Yeah.
And I say this to my friends who all have young kids, my friends and my siblings who all have young kids. I say, you think of all the work you're putting into your kids, getting along and being kind and sharing and just living together well. If you fast forward and said 61% of them will never, after your parents are gone, they're not going to have any more meaningful connections. Like,
Wow.
it's not that hard to see why, and the reasons why are so unacceptable. It's like they didn't agree on how the funeral was supposed to happen. They didn't grieve the same way. There's some
Right.
pain, there's some, toughness there, and you just kind of grew apart starting at that moment, and then that's it. Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
can't we can't let that
Wow.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And again, that speaks to the importance of having these conversations,
Exactly.
and looking at this together. So if as siblings, we sit down and look at these different personas and we think about who's going to do what and when, if a lot of that's been talked about on an ongoing basis, like Ana Luisa and I talk to our kids about
Yes.
on a regular
Ad
basis.
nauseum.
I know. It's such a
That it's
gift.
going to be
It's
a
a
lot
real
less.
gift.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot less likely that whole disenfranchisement or disconnection is going to happen. So I
Right.
love that. It's so important. Thank you for that.
I do.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that too because I just, of course, learned something new, and I was thinking about my two kids who will be, in charge of me. I have a crier and a non-crier. I think the crier is going to want to be tending to that open heart of hers, right? And I remember last year when our cat died, like they discussed their values around interment versus cremation. Like, yeah, and I told Wakil in an interview, I was like, I don't want my kids to be fighting over this and then like be so mad. Like, I gotta
Right.
just like write it down, get it done, and then hopefully they will continue to be connected after
Yes.
this, time. And you
Yes.
want it to be meaningful and sacred.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was
And
talking to two brothers, and their father had told one of them he wanted to be cremated, the other one he wanted to be buried, and they were
Wow.
just so upset with each other, and they didn't know what to do, and I just said, like, I am not a therapist, but could I just suggest flipping a coin and giving each other a hug, because statistically you guys are not going to get over this, and
Right.
you're going to be upset, and it's it's
And what another
unfortunate.
loss.
Yes. And like, I'm really sorry you lost your dad, but let's not complicate it with placing this anger on your brother because it's actually objectively confusing on what to do. So I
Right.
couldn't agree more. We couldn't be more aligned on leave a legacy of clarity, and that is the kindest thing you could possibly do. And if people could get that message, I think there's so much healing that can happen.
Yeah,
I know.
Well, and talking about having this whole discussion ahead of time, and it takes one more bit of grief away, right? Because one of the I think that you just talked about, that 61%, that's a huge loss right there. That people are going to be grieving in one way or another, on
Yes.
beyond the grief of their loss of their loved one. So they've
Yes.
actually lost not only their beloved who died, but now they've lost their siblings, their friends,
Yes.
whatever. That's just a huge thing to add on. So wow, what a wonderful thing to make a point of as part of your planning and as part of your conversations. Let's not have that happen, right? Let's
Yes.
figure this out ahead of time as best we can.
Yes.
Or if it is happening, to have people like you or us, around to say, let's stop a moment and look at the way that you're grieving. And talk about, this is a different way of grieving, but do you really want to grieve forever the loss of this relationship as well as the loss of your loved one?
Right.
So
Yes.
there's again, another bit of work for all of us and for everybody who's listening too.
Yes.
So I'm
Wow.
going to go with the challenges. So what are the
Yeah.
challenges that you find in your work?
I think the most interesting thing for me is, and you guys are obviously living in this world as well, is getting your end of life plan is on almost everybody's to-do list. Unfortunately, it tends to be towards the bottom, and I have never gotten to the end of my to-do list. I don't know
No.
about you guys.
No.
So it's about that, and I don't want to over dramatize it, but I also think in the world where we don't have a collective, like we don't have a lot in common, end of life we do have in common with everyone. It might be the last thing that we all have in common. And I think that taking this kind of big philosophical concept that I understand we're either conditioned and trained or predisposed to not want to think about or talk about. I see it, I get it, I live it, I have the same situation, I'm human. Getting people to say, you know what I'm not going to do is leave question marks. What I'm not going to do is get to this later. I'm going to tackle this right now. And so that is definitely our biggest challenge. And that's why I think the grief personas can be a little bit of a release valve where it's like, oh, I understand myself a tiny bit more. And if you understand yourself a tiny bit more, then you can understand how things feel right or wrong or in sync or not. So, for example, if someone's a steady hand and you send them an email, let's get your will and legal documents organized. They're like, okay, yeah, let's. And but you don't want to send that to every type of person. It's like, leave me alone. I have enough stuff to do, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think that helping identify who people are and how they are, and that's why we put just an 8-question quiz on our website so that you can pretty quickly figure it out, even though I've actually found most people can guess what they're going to be. But if you understand what you are, then it can kind of be step 1 in this kind of vast hill to climb of stuff. So stuff to tackle. So that's really our biggest challenge is, can you take step 1 and just start saying, look, I'm nothing in life not thinking about has really ever gotten better, right? At least my experience. So putting things off in terms of where you put energy that needs to go has not served me, at least. So
That's right.
I think it's that. It's the idea that it's why I actually, I was saying this before we were recording, I feel like kinship with you both, because if you're here ready to talk about it, you know that you're kind of the weirdo at a dinner party when people
you are too.
Yes. And it's like, and you find that people are like, oh, that's so great that you're doing that. Thank you. And it's helping others who are more reluctant. And
Yeah.
I think, again, it's like, it can also be generational. Like my grandparents didn't really talk to my parents about this. And so there's also, it's learned behavior. It's like, I'm not going to let, when I die, a big bundle of confusion. I won't be leaving a big bundle of confusion that's going to cause stress for the people I love the most.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think if you could have that conversation, everyone gets it. It's
Yeah.
that not everyone's listening to your podcast or on our website. So I think
Yeah.
for others, it's like asking people politely, like, how are you doing this? How are you helping? What, example is I'm my sister's godparent for her kids. Like, it would be really I'm happy to take on that major responsibility. It'd be really helpful if you could do a little bit of the work. God forbid I ever need it. And so I think those conversations and helping people have those conversations with their own communities and their own networks, I see it building and getting easier.
Yes.
But there's still a lot of work to
Lots to do. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of work to do, and it is about having conversation, because it occurred to me, like, I told myself by my birthday this year I was going to redo my advanced care directive plan. I think I opened it up and I piddled around in it, but I never printed it and had it signed again. So I'm behind on that this year, and it troubles me that it is on the last thing on my to-do list. And I talk about so many different aspects of that with my children and my close friends that if my kids had to figure this out, they'd be like, well, these are the people who are not going to be around mom, and this is what she really wanted. And, so at least they'd have a guiding memory that is, so they have at least that.
Yeah. It's always important to write it down, like we said, but you're right, the conversation is the first part and the first most important piece. We also, and I do a class. I think we've done classes that's a couple hours long of all the things that you can document that would help, that would be helpful, all the things you can take care of now. And at the end, I almost always say, be kind to yourself. You're not going to get all this done tomorrow, but do it like you do any other important priority task. Put it on your calendar. Maybe have a half an hour a week or an hour a week where you sit down and work on it, or whatever amount of time you can dedicate to it. And then if you don't get it done, don't beat yourself up. We don't shoot all over ourselves here. And just, say, oops, I didn't get to it. I'll get to it next time, but keep it on the calendar, keep it on your top of mind as a priority and in your conversations. And I think the other thing is, when you're having these conversations, the people who are less likely to want to do this are at least going to start getting, the ripple's going to happen, right? They're going to start getting, oh yeah, I heard about this. Maybe I should be thinking about this. And so I think it is, as you said, I think it's starting to ripple out. People are beginning, and it might just be the people we hang out with, but
I know, our world, everybody's talking about it.
I know. I think that's called selection bias. I couldn't agree more. I think also an accountability partner. So if there's someone who's close, you just say, hey, can you make sure I, do this, and I have this documented. I'm like trying to hold myself accountable. That's been really helpful, because that's the person who, likely your accountability partner is the person who will want this the most.
right.
And so that's the person who's most incentivized for you to help with that. And then the other thing I was going to say is just the more about understanding who you are and how you grieve, because I think one of the things, again, grief personas aren't a cure-all, but one of the things is, if you have just like a big cloud of trauma or grief, or just, I have all the worst feelings about when this situation happened, when my grandma died, everything went wrong and it was the biggest fight, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's that alone is going to prevent you from thinking about your own end of life. So it's kind of coming back to this. Okay, well, that was a mess, but I don't want to leave a mess myself. So it matters to break this cycle of that.
That's so good. So important. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. How do you keep yourself resourced while you're doing this when you're feeling a little overwhelmed? We always like to hear about that, because everybody needs resourcing.
You know what? I love that's such a good question. I mean, one thing I will say with I'll give you an example. We were adding an obituary writer to our website and I was
Mm,
testing it out, and it's a few questions and where did this person live, and just basic questions that would go into an obituary, and I was testing it out, and I mean, I probably tested it 20 times in a row one day, and every time I'm filling in about my mom, right? Every
mm.
single time. And then I'm just like, oh my God, I completely knocked myself right into grief. I just did that too many times. No
Mhm.
one should write their mom's obituary 20 times in a row.
Good,
And she died 3 years ago, right?
Oh.
good
It's just,
advice.
yeah. So I think that is one of the things, again, just being very aware. For me, grief looks like fatigue. It just is like I
Mhm.
am out of gas to keep going.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, I just go right back to things that I did right after I lost her, like give myself
Uh-huh.
space, take a
Uh-huh.
nap, take a grief nap, which I jokingly say is like the only nap that you don't have to feel bad about, right? Like just take a nap, lie down. So
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and then the other one that I know you guys have found as well is this space is just feel if people are called to this work, whether you're a nurse working with people end of life, a funeral director, a content creator, a builder. There are people building some of the coolest things for all of us. Um, those people are there. Like find those
Mm,
people, and they're drawn to this for a reason, and just go find people like that. So
yeah.
conversations like this fill me up for sure because
Yes.
it's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yep.
hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. I think one of the things when we talk about this with the world as it is, it's so important to have your community and to know who you can turn to and to have somebody that you can look to as a companion or a counselor or a teacher or friend, just somebody
Mhm.
that you can reach out to and say, "Wow, this is too much for me right now. Can I just cry on your shoulder for a little while, or
Yes.
can we
Mhm.
just yell at each
Mhm.
other for a
Mhm.
while, or you know, go scream
Yeah.
at a
Mhm.
tree or whatever we need to do?" But yeah, I think
Absolutely.
such an important resource to have that in place and know that you've got that and be open to it, open to
Hmm.
stepping into that and not be afraid of somebody thinking you're crazy for screaming at trees.
No,
Okay,
they don't
speaking
mind.
of crazy and frightened, what frightens you about the end of life?
I think I have maybe it's just I'm a steady hand, right? So I'm a logistics
Mhm.
person. So at the
Mhm.
bottom of the logistics is figure out what that's all really about. And I think the more I grow up and the more I work in this space and the more space I hold with end of life, the more I start to deeply understand that for me, I'm not going to have an answer when I die, a
Mm.
full
Mhm.
answer. I think there are people who have real deep faith in what happens after you die. And for me, I'm never going to get to the end of my to-do list that does contain figure out what happens when we
What's on
die,
the other side
why
of
we die, all of that.
it?
So a
You
steady
live in
hand
the
doesn't like,
mystery.
yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to just really use that as um like a powerful energy to pull us to truths. And one of the things I've said for a long time is I believe that wisdom is the ability to hold two completely conflicting things at the
Mhm.
same time and not short circuit like a computer going
Yeah.
Yeah.
berserk. And I think it's that. I think that it's um there are many different truths you need to hold about end of life and what we will know, what we won't know, when we will know, if we will know, any of those things. And that's actually the beauty of life, not the
Mm.
torture of
Right.
unknowing. And
The living
I
in
think that's,
paradox.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, steady hands maybe don't love that, but I'm trying to just sit with it and let it kind of wash over
Hmm.
me because I don't think I'm going to have an answer myself.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the basis of many of our feelings is a mysticism of just letting it be a mystery
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
being willing to hold both yes and no. So,
Yes.
yeah. So thank you for that. That's very important. Well, is there anything that you wish we would have asked you? Um,
Oh, that's a good question. nothing's coming to mind. I mean, my only regret is I wish I could ask you all these same questions, or I should have asked you all these, because I think you guys are filled with so much knowledge and so much thoughtfulness into it. And I really, like I said earlier, I listened to a bunch of these and they're so profound. You guys are unbelievably poised on them too. I'm really impressive. So I can't thank you
Thank
enough
you.
for having me on, because your personalities also come through and you're just as nice as I thought you would be.
Lovely,
Well,
lovely.
well, now that you know us, and you can always
Yes.
reach out, and we can
Okay.
we can stay friends. We have our
Yeah,
quote though.
You want
Oh,
to share your
yes.
quote? You want to share it? You could sing it.
Actually, I don't have it. I don't want to misquote the legend, so I don't have it in front of me. Do you have your quote? Do you have
Yeah,
it?
we've got it. It's Dolly
I can
Parton.
pull it up. Yes, I did
Um,
go with a Dolly Parton quote just
I
because.
love
Love
that.
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
a goat of a
So
woman. She's unbelievable.
it's well, I'll read it. It says, "Questions I have many, answers but a few. But we're here to learn. The spirit burns to know the greater truth." By Dolly Parton. Yeah, what
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
wonderful,
Goosebumps.
wise person we have. Yeah, me too. Wonderful, wise person we have to as a resource for all of us, Dolly Parton.
Mhm.
Yes.
So more from her. Well, again, we
Yes.
thank you so much,
Thank
and
you, Sarah.
we
Thank
hope we'll
you. Thank you both.
hope we'll hear more from you in the future. And certainly, I highly recommend everybody taking a look at the website and learning more about it. And hope everybody will tell all your friends, subscribe,
Yeah.
like,
Thanks so much.
and keep in
Yeah.
touch.
Yep.
Adios.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Grief and loss, conversations about the end of life.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Charles Heaston, the composer of the original music you are listening to now.
And of course, thanks to you, our audience, and all of our amazing guests. Please come back next week for another great episode. Share this with your friends, family, and community. We hope you will subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack. Each guest's additional information will be found in the podcast notes. And of course, if you have a good end-of-life story to share, please reach out. We are always eager to hear from you.